Hey everyone, this is Mike and today we're going to be talking about Gunbreaker in Shadowbringers, the last job on the list. I know technically Monk is still left, but as I mentioned before, I'm going to be leaving that one for 5.4 when the rework rolls around. So for now, Gunbreaker is going to be the one to finish off the series, save the best for last, because Gunbreaker is arguably my favorite job in the game at the moment, because it combines three elements that I really enjoy in Final Fantasy XIV. First of all, it's a tank, that's my favorite role, hence why it's kind of high on the list already. Second of all, its DPS rotation feels very much so like a melee DPS as well, because you have a lot of double weaving going on in your rotation, and you also have a 1 minute burst window that also feels very much so like the old Machinist from back in Heavensward, which is something that I also really enjoyed. So it's a very active job to play, and that is something that I really enjoy about Gunbreaker, because the other three tanks don't necessarily have that as much. I know Dark Knight is still relatively active, but it's definitely not as active as something like a Gunbreaker. Now, because of its very active rotation, it can also be looked at as a downside for a tank, because you're gonna be double weaving a lot for your DPS, meaning that you don't have that many places where you can weave your defensive cooldowns, because of course you're still a tank, so you will need to weave those mitigative cooldowns as well here or there when tank busters or raid-wide AoEs are happening. And with Gunbreaker, that is definitely the hardest to do compared to what the other three tanks have going for them. So that is something that you will have to learn on a fight by fight basis to basically see where you can use your defensive cooldowns in advance so that they don't interrupt your DPS rotation for when you go into your burst phase or something like that. So because of that, a lot of people think Gunbreaker is pretty hard to learn, especially because you have to adjust to every single fight that you are doing, whereas something like a warrior can just reactively use cooldowns. When they see a tank buster come up with Gunbreaker, you usually need to use your defensive cooldowns a little bit in advance, because of course for some stupid reason all of the tank busters or movement parts of the boss will be when your burst window is coming up. Now because of that, Gunbreaker is usually best suited in the off-tank role, because you're going to be double weaving a lot. It's usually not that simple to move bosses around the arena as much, so that is why I think Gunbreaker is best suited for the off-tank role, but it is totally possible to play in the main tank role. For all of my time playing Gunbreaker in a static environment, I have always played as the main tank, because that is just the tank role that I enjoy the most. I know technically main tank, off-tank isn't as prevalent in this expansion as it has been before, but still it kind of exists in certain fights here or there, and I definitely do gravitate towards the main tank role as that being my favorite one, and I will gladly play Gunbreaker in that role as well, even though it's a little bit harder to play than, say, for example, if the off-tank role, because you have to move the boss around as well, and moving the boss around during your heavy off-global cooldown windows can be a bit tricky. So let's first talk about the tanking part of Gunbreaker, and then we'll dive into its DPS rotation. So as all of the other tanks, Gunbreaker has access to Rampart, 20% damage mitigation. For their 30% we have Nebula, again just last 15 seconds, just as with the other tanks. And then we go into their own specific cooldowns. First one being Camouflage. Now this ability is kinda crap, to be honest. So what it does is it provides you a 50% parry up as well as a 10% damage reduction. The 50% parry up is something that in most raid environments you can pretty much disregard, and the 10% damage reduction is the only thing that is guaranteed. Now what you can do with Camouflage is you can use it on, for example, a physical tank buster, and then basically have a coin flip. Am I gonna parry it, yes or no? Could get some extra mitigation out of there, but you definitely don't want to rely on you parrying something for a tank buster, for example. Now what you can do with this cooldown is, of course, you can layer it together with the Rampart, together with your spammable cooldown, or you can use it in dungeons, because in dungeons you are mostly dealing with physical damage, and then 50% parry rate is pretty decent to be used in a dungeon. So it is more of a dungeon group tanking cooldown rather than something that you would be using on a boss fight. Of course, the 10% is still there, it's not that much, but you might as well layer it on top of something else to just give you a little bit of extra defensive mitigation, or you can just use it to mitigate auto attacks, because most of the auto attacks in this game are going to be physical damage as well, except I think Innocence is one of the only bosses in Shadowbringers that has magical auto attack, so it's still there, you can use it, it's just not that great. If I were to increase the parry rate to 100%, then this could be a really good cooldown for physical tank busters, for example, but I don't think they would do that. Moving on to Aurora, this is a heal over time effect, lasts for 18 seconds, so you can have this up for about 30% of the time, which is a pretty decent uptime. This is the same potency as Warrior's Equilibrium, but the thing is that this is a heal over time, so it's not going to feel the same as with Warrior, but it is going to be mitigating damage over time, so to speak, because it is going to give you a regen. Again, it's healing, you can place it on yourself, you can place it on another party member as well. So say for example, one of your DPSs got hit by an ability they were not supposed to get hit by, and you can just throw it on them, regen them up again. Something's pretty useful. Heart of Stone is our spammable cooldown. This one has a 15% damage reduction, so it's definitely the weakest of them all. But the cool thing about this one is that when you use this on another party member, you are going to be transferring the Brutal Shell shield. Now, Brutal Shell is part of your 1-2-3 combo in your DPS rotation, so we'll talk about that one in a bit. But basically, the second combo in your 1-2-3 combo is going to grant you a shield, and this one will last for 30 seconds. Of course, granted it's not broken by an auto attack from the boss. But if you have the shield on you, most likely in the off-tank role, and you use Heart of Stone on the main tank, you're also going to be transferring that shield, making your 15% a tiny bit stronger by giving also a 200 potency shield on top of that. Of course, it won't make or break this skill, it's just a little bit of extra mitigation that is quite nice. Our ultimate cooldown is called Superbolite, which I'm actually a pretty big fan of Superbolite, because it is very user-friendly to heal up. Of course, Paladin is the strongest when we're looking at it from a healer perspective, where you don't have to care about the tank at all, but when it comes down to Living Dead and Home Gang, those are a little bit more annoying to heal. Because Living Dead, you need to heal the Dark Knight for 100% of their HP. Of course, if you have a Benediction lying around, that's no issue, but if you don't have a White Mage or you don't have Benediction ready on the White Mage, it can be a little bit more annoying to heal. When it comes down to Warrior, you're not actually mitigating damage, you're just making sure that you don't drop below 1 HP, and then of course after the tank buster has hit, you immediately want to start healing that warrior so that they don't die to auto attacks as soon as the home gang duration runs out. Whereas with Superbolite, you're kind of combining these two things. So first of all, you are going to be dropping to 1 HP, which kind of sucks if you're full HP, but once you drop to 1 HP, you're not going to be taking damage for the next 8 seconds, so it's really easy to heal you back up. You can already heal the Gunbreaker back up before the tank buster has even hit, or you can just throw some regens on the tank. You can, for example, give them a fairy tether from the Scholar, or throw an off-global cooldown on there, and then it's still pretty decent. And then again, if you are in a static environment, you are going to be using your Superbolite at planned moments in the boss fight as well. You can just let your healers drop you a little bit lower than you usually would, and then right before the tank buster goes out, you're maybe at like 20k HP, and then you're not losing too much HP from there as well. So it's definitely a pretty decent cooldown. Do quite enjoy it. Of course, it also makes for amazing moments when you think you're about to die, so you're like, okay, I need to use Superbolite, or I'm just gonna die to auto attacks, like in a dungeon for example, and then the White Mage presses Benediction right before you press Superbolite, and then you're just looking at each other awkwardly and you're going like, oh, this is awkward. So something that does make for some funny moments here or there. And then last but not least, we have Heart of Light. This is our party mitigation cooldown, just reduces magic damage taken by 10% for 15 seconds, exactly the same as Dark Missionary from Dark Knight, but still makes it pretty good. So let's move over to the DPS. This is the fun part of Gunbreaker, because as I mentioned before, Gunbreaker is kind of like the DPS-like tank in the game. So the whole DPS rotation is going to be focused around a 60-second burst phase called No Mercy, because that is your DPS buff. It lasts for 20 seconds, but we'll talk about that one in just a second. And in total, we are going to be having a 3-minute rotation because of a skill called Bloodfest. Now we have this 60-second burst phase, but because Bloodfest is on a 90-second cooldown, all of our burst phases are going to be looking kind of different within this 3-minute window. So you have your opener, then you have the second burst window, you have the third burst window, and then after that it's pretty much going to be looking the same as if you were to repeat it from the opener. When it comes down to the combos, Gunbreaker is pretty simple because we only have a 1-2-3 combo. That's everything kind of the same as with Dark Knight, although we do have a special combo that we'll talk about in just a second as well. And this combo will do two things for you. So the second hit in the combo will grant you that Brutal Shell shield that I talked about before, and it will also heal you. So it heals you for 200 potency, and then it also shields you for 200 potency. So it's pretty nice to just mitigate some auto attacks, or of course if you're in the off-tank role, you're going to have that shield ready to give to the main tank by using Heart of Stone. And then the third hit in your combo is going to be generating a cartridge. This cartridge can stack up to 2 times on your cartridge gauge, and we can spend this on 3 different things. We have an AoE ability, we have a single target ability, and we have a special combo. Now this special combo is what makes Gunbreaker for me. It's called the Gnashing Fang combo or the Continuation combo, because it does 2 things. First of all, Gnashing Fang is on a 30-second cooldown, it scales with skill speed. But when you press this GCD, you're going to be going into its own separate combo that is only available going off from Gnashing Fang. Now another cool thing here is that every time that you press a GCD inside this Gnashing Fang combo, which is also a 1-2-3 combo, your continuation of global cooldown is also going to be changing. So you're going to be pressing Gnashing Fang, your continuation of global cooldown changes into another of global cooldown. You press the second skill in the combo, your continuation changes again, you press the third skill in the combo, and then your continuation changes again. So basically when you go into your Gnashing Fang combo, you're going to be pressing the GCDs as well as the continuation of global cooldown every single time you go into the next GCD from this combo. And this is what makes it so that Gunbreaker feels so incredibly active, because even though you only have one 1-2-3 combo technically, you still have this special Gnashing Fang combo that you have access to every 30 seconds that you want to use on cooldown as well, because you want to have it ready for that 1-minute burst phase. And then the Gnashing Fang combo itself is going to be very active because you're going to get a guaranteed 1 of global cooldown between each GCD press there as well. And then last but not least, we have another special GCD. This one is on a 60-second cooldown, again skills with skill speed, which is called Sonic Break, and this one will place a damage over time effect on the boss. Because it's on a 1-minute cooldown, we only are going to be using this during our burst window. Moving over to our off-global cooldowns. We don't have that many over here. Of course, we do have that continuation one that is going to be pressed quite often during the Gnashing Fang combo, but I'm not going to be putting that one in here because we just talked about it. So first of all, we have No Mercy. This one is a 20% damage buff for 20 seconds, for which we basically want to be pooling all of our resources towards. All of our 30-second cooldowns are going to be in here. All of our 1-minute cooldowns are going to be saved up for this burst window as well. Because it's a 1-minute buff, makes it really good to line up with pretty much all of the raid buffs in the game almost. You have the Trick Attack, you have Divination, Chain Stratagem, Brotherhood you don't really hit because it's a 90-second, but you still have that Gnashing Fang combo that is going to hit that 90-second buff as well. So Gunbreaker lines up pretty well with almost all of the raid buffs in the game, which is why its DPS output is so pretty good. So that is pretty much No Mercy, your buff window. Outside of that, we have Blasting Zone. This is just an off-global cooldown that will deal some damage. Basically, press it on cooldown. It is also on a 30-second recast timer, meaning that you're using one Blasting Zone every time that you're using Gnashing Fang. Again, because it is on a 30-second cooldown, is also going to be hitting those raid buffs like Brotherhood from the Monk, for example. Then we have Rough Divide. This is our gap closer, stacks up to 2 times, again 30-second recast timer, meaning that for the most part you're going to be saving up 2 charges for when you go into the No Mercy buff. But of course, if you need it for a gap closer, you can use it as a gap closer as well. But in most fights, you're just going to be using this for some extra damage underneath your No Mercy burst window. Then Bow Shock, this one is a AoE damage over time ability, so makes it very strong when you're going into dungeons, but because it is on a 1-minute cooldown, you're again just going to be saving this for inside the No Mercy, just an off-global cooldown damaging ability you're going to be pressing on cooldown. And then last but not least, we have Bloodfest. This is something that will grant you 2 cartridges, so you need to make sure that your cartridge gauge is completely empty, and this is on a 90-second recast timer. So this is what makes it so that you have a 3-minute rotation. Even though you have a 60-second burst phase, the rotation itself is going to be 3 minutes because of Bloodfest. So you need to make sure that you don't have any cartridges when you use this. And the annoying part about this ability as well is that you need to have a target that you can use this on. It's not like Infuriate of Warrior where you just press it and you get 50 gauge. Here with Bloodfest, you need to actually have a target for you to be able to use this, which can be kind of annoying if you're going into a downtime phase, like for example Innocence, I believe, has a really annoying timing with this, where he'll do his at phase transition towards like the second phase of the fight, and then Bloodfest is ready and you can't use it because the boss isn't targetable. So if they were to change anything about this, I kind of hope that they make it so like it is kind of like Infuriate, where you can use it when you're just in combat and you don't need a specific target to use this on. But there's some lore reasons behind it why it is the way it is. But that's pretty much Gunbreaker. It's a really fun job to play if you're somebody that wants to get into tanking, but you think tanking is a little bit too boring when you look at something like a Paladin or a Warrior because they're a little bit too slow, they don't have enough off-global cooldowns for you to press. Then definitely take a look at Gunbreaker. It's also starting at level 60, meaning you already have a very big part of your kit ready right at the get-go. I believe continuation starts at level 70, so it doesn't really take all that long for the rotation to come together, because once you unlock that continuation, that is where Gunbreaker becomes extremely fun to play. And if you're somebody that is coming over from playing a DPS and you find tanks a little bit too boring, I think Gunbreaker might be right up your alley, because it still very much so feels like a melee DPS. But that's gonna be it for me. If you have any more questions, if you have anything else you want to add to this, then feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.